In this video we want to talk about industrial conflict. The definition identifies key elements of industrial relations. So what we need to do here is to look at what we mean by industrial conflict and identify the key elements in industrial relations. First of all, we must recognize that conflict can arise from a variety of sources. It can be based on attitudes and on behaviors. There's an incompatibility between two sides, and whenever that incompatibility emerges, there tends to be conflict. Now, the incompatibility could be based about real issues, working issues associated with the job or associated with the requirements or the tasks involved in completing the job. It could be about the attitude of the line manager or of a particular operator. It could be based on personality. It can arise from a variety of sources. But conflict, whenever humans are involved, conflict is just under the surface. The possibility of conflict is always there. The root cause of conflict occurs when there is a disagreement between employees and managers or owners. The disagreement can be about, as I said, salary, wages. It can be about working conditions. It can be about the tasks that are expected of the operator. It can be related to the attitude of the managers, the way they speak to the operator, the way the operator speaks to them. It can be on a whole variety of fronts. But conflict is almost ever present when we have humans involved. Conflict takes form when there is a lack of cooperation from the opposing party. That's when conflict really bites. It's when one side withholds cooperation. For a task to be completed, it takes two sides. It takes the operator and it takes the management. And the two sides collaborate to complete the tasks and keep the business running. But when one side refuses to cooperate, that's when we say we have conflict. Now, Kornhauser, very early definition, just simply talked about it as the total range of behaviors and attitudes that express opposition and divergent orientations between owners and managers on the one hand and working people and their organization on the other. So it's when there is a difference in attitudes and behaviors, a difference that leads to lack of cooperation and to misunderstandings and issues between the two sides. Workplace conflict is an important element within employee relations. As I said earlier, whenever humans are involved, the potential for conflict is there. And so it's an important element in organizations. Organizations employ workers to complete tasks. If the workers do not cooperate, the tasks will not be completed and the organization will be damaged. And that, of course, is mutually destructive. It's destructive for the management and for the workers, because the organization may cease to exist, and hence they will lose their employment, they'll lose their incomes. It depends on the nature of the conflict, the root cause of the conflict and the significance of the conflict. The root cause, as I said, could be down to attitude, it could be personality clashes, it could be something in a sense real, in the sense that the tasks are not realistic, or the tasks are dangerous, or the requirements on the part of the operator are too onerous. It can arise in various ways. But as long as that potential exists, then conflict can arise. And as I said, conflict can lead to mutual destruction. Trade unions have developed as a result of workplace disputes. Before trade unions, management was in a sense all powerful. They could hire and fire. They could take on workers and dismiss workers, and the workers had no alternative. There was no welfare state. There was no government benefits. There were no transfer payments from one group within society to the other group. There was no taxation system or formal system to support the unemployed. So in that case, the management of the organizations were in a sense all powerful. They could determine the welfare of their workers. They could determine the amount was paid in wages, and they could determine the working conditions. Trade unions developed because workers needed to speak with power. They needed to speak with force. And the easiest way to do that was to combine, form themselves into a union, so that the management was now facing one voice, the union. And it was felt that that was more balanced. So unions are organized to facilitate and maintain harmony within the workplace environment. That was the idea. The idea was to bring about some sort of equity, some sort of balance between the powers of management and the powers of the workers. And in so doing, bring about a harmony within the working environment. Now, of course, over the years, these organizations have changed. Management now sees itself in a different light, more enlightened perhaps. But the trade unions are also seen as perhaps having gone through a period of extreme strength. They're seen perhaps as not so useful in a modern society because your membership is falling and so on. Now that's a very controversial thing to say, and it's not meant to be accurate. It's just probably more provocative than anything else, but it is a reflection of the fact that trade union membership has fallen and trade unions are not held, or don't appear to be held, in the same regard, say, by the media. So industrial conflict, it still relies on organisation on the part of the workers. If an individual worker takes industrial action, the management can work around it. If all the workers combine and take industrial action and perhaps go on strike, then the management must take that into account. So the logic for trade unions is still there. The logic for taking collective action is still there. So industrial conflict arises when there is dissatisfaction within the workplace, when there is something annoying the workers. It could be their wages have fallen behind, or it could be working conditions, or the hours of work, or holiday entitlement. It could be any of a wide range of issues. When there is dissatisfaction, then there is the roots for industrial conflict. So it stems from disagreement regarding employment contracts, issues within the workplace, and so on. Now it can be categorized. Conflict can be categorized as informal industrial conflict, or it could be formal industrial conflict. Informal industrial conflict, well, this type of conflict occurs from grievances and results in unorganized forms of protest. Sometimes the wider union will not take on board particular grievances. They're seen as perhaps the worker or the workers, the set of workers involved, could have worked around it or could have found a solution themselves, and there is no need to involve all of the workers and the trade union and perhaps lead to wider conflict. After all, when the workers are on strike, they don't get paid, so it is a costly activity. So generally speaking, conflict of this sort arises from grievances and results in unorganized forms of protest, usually small-scale protests, perhaps working to rule, working according to exactly what the job requires, nothing more. It could be perhaps absenteeism, as we'll see later in the slide. It can lead to various forms of unorganized protest. It could lead to industrial sabotage. Um, that's quite extreme, but it could be that the workers sabotage the production system. Perhaps they damage the machine, and the machine will then need maintenance, and the machine is offline. Output will be lost within the organisation. That will damage the organisation and hurt the management. So it could be, or it could be the workers are not careful about the output, and the quality of the output falls. It's a type of industrial sabotage. The protest can be intentional or unintentional. Employees may not be aware that they are protesting. Sometimes people are angry over something. They're not aware they're protesting, but in fact, because they are no longer fully engaged or enthusiastic about what they're doing, there's poor quality output and lower productivity. So it's not intentional. They're not doing it intentionally, but it's just happening because they are not fully engaged. Their minds are not on the task. They're annoyed about something. Informal industrial conflict. Well, there are different types of informal industrial conflict. Poor output, productivity, quality of goods and services. These, as I said, may be intentional or unintentional. But it's informal. It's not organized. It just happens because the workers are not happy. They are not engaged in their activities. They're not motivated properly. They're not happy about what they're expected to do. So this manifests itself in terms of poor output, poor productivity, and reduced quality of goods and services. It could be that there's a high level of employee turnover and absenteeism. People, when they're not happy, they will look for other jobs. They will try to move between companies because they're not happy in that organisation. They may not like the management of the organisation, or the way the company is structured, or the way the working conditions may not suit them. It could lead to absenteeism. People simply take days off on a regular basis and they're not reliable. The company finds it difficult to plan production because the workers are taking days off. So frequent job changing, employee turnover, as I said, that may be an issue which suggests that there is an underlying conflict, there's an underlying issue. And that's what should signal up to management, that there is something wrong, something within the organisation needs to be fixed. It could lead to negligence and workplace accidents if the workers are not concentrating, or they're not, as I said earlier, fully engaged in what they're doing. They may become lax, and accidents can happen. It could be, as I said also earlier, it could lead to sabotage, not just negligence. They could actively set about stopping the machines, damaging the machines, but doing so in a way that perhaps they're not going to be detected. They're just going to stop the machine or slow the machine so that they're inflicting damage on the organisation. There could be walkouts and unorganised strike activity. It could be that some days the workers are so annoyed over something, or some issue, or something the management said, or a new policy the management is implementing or attempting to implement, perhaps a new pay scale that doesn't suit the workers or whatever. The workers may find this news on a particular day and walk out, just simply stop work and leave in protest. They expect to be called back by the management, and they expect to be able to negotiate with the management and find a solution. But it's an unorganised strike activity. The union has not condoned it. The union is not involved. They just simply stop work, walk out. Opposition to workplace policies and unwillingness to cooperate. Those are the root causes of walkouts and unorganised strike activity. They're simply not happy with the workplace policy, perhaps with remuneration, with the terms of employment, changes to workers' contracts, changes to the work routine within the company. And therefore they are unwilling to cooperate, which could lead to a walkout, an unorganised strike activity. And falling short of that, as I said earlier in point 4, it could be negligence, there could be sabotage, there could simply be a high turnover of labour, people leaving the company because they're so dissatisfied, which is an indicator to management that something is wrong. Now, formal industrial conflict. This is, generally speaking, organised and supervised by trade unions and workplace representatives. This is more formal. This is when the trade union becomes involved, they see an issue, they're supporting the workers, and the trade union organises the protest. Formal conflicts take place in high-skilled and education work environments, the same as manual environments. So the potential for conflict is not restricted to labour work or hard manual work. It cuts right across the services and at all levels. The civil service, who say work for the government directly, they may have issues the same as people working in the car works on an assembly line. So the idea of conflict is not restricted to any particular type of industry or any particular type of worker. It cuts right across. The main form of industrial action is an organised strike. Generally speaking, that's what we understand by industrial action, is a strike. That's when the union is involved, the issue is large, it's complicated, it requires union intervention to negotiate with the management to try and find a solution. Strike is a form of industrial action taken to express disagreement regarding work-related issues. The strike is the ultimate form of disagreement. That's when the workers refuse to work for the company and are trying to get the company to change their policy or change some aspect of employment to make it more palatable to them. Of course, that may be to the disadvantage of the organisation, and so negotiations are required between the two sides to try to compromise and find a solution. An organised strike involves a collective group of workers who withdraw from labour to achieve improved conditions of employment and pay. And that's all a strike is. It's when workers leave the premises, leave the company, and try to stop the company from working by having, let's say, a picket line and stopping the company from continuing its business until it negotiates with them and until, ideally from their perspective, they get what they want. But generally speaking, it should be a two-way street. The management should get some concessions and the union should get some concessions, and between them they find a solution. Organised strikes only take effect under collective agreements and conducted through legal procedures. There are rules about how to conduct a strike. For example, secondary picketing is not allowed in the UK. Only employees of the company are allowed to picket and demonstrate outside of the premises. Generally speaking, strikes are organised by the trade unions. They're on the basis of some grievance, and the idea behind the strike is to achieve negotiations and satisfactory outcomes from negotiations with the employers. So these are a few ideas about industrial conflict. It's a very straightforward topic, but nonetheless it's one that I think we need to complete to understand the basis for industrial conflict. So let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.